Developing right now on Morning News Now, President Trump doubling down on deportations. A federal judge threatening to hold his administration in contempt for ignoring orders to turn back planes full of deportees now behind bars in an El Salvador mega prison. But the Trump administration pushing back against growing calls to bring back a man who they admit was mistakenly deported.
This is about due process. This is about not letting people be just whisked off the street.
If he ever ends up back in the United States, he would immediately be deported again. He will never live in the United States of America again.
We have team coverage with both sides of the growing debate. Also, Wall Street in the red again. Chipmakers leading a sell-off over tariffs as Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell sounds off on the potential impacts of the trade war. Bring you the latest and how it could affect you. Plus, America in crisis. New numbers show depression rates are on the rise nationwide. The eye-opening survey from the CDC, including which groups are most at risk and why only a fraction of people are getting the help they need. And Los Angeles going for gold ahead of the 2028 Olympics. We'll show you some of the venues preparing to host some of the world's best athletes. The LA Olympics will be here before you know. Just 2028 coming quickly.
Right there.
Good morning. Good to have you with us on this Thursday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Stephen Romo in for Savannah today.
We begin this morning with the Trump administration's escalating legal battles with the courts on multiple fronts over immigration deportations. A federal judge in Washington is now threatening the administration with contempt for what he's calling willful disregard of his order to halt those flights carrying immigrants to El Salvador back in March. Contempt proceedings could force some officials to testify under oath.
And this comes as another federal judge in Maryland is looking for information on any efforts by the administration to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who the Justice Department says was mistakenly deported. The Trump administration released records yesterday detailing how police officers in Maryland came to believe that Abrego Garcia was a member of the gang MS-13 during an arrest in 2019. His family denies he was a member of that violent gang, and he does not have a criminal record in the U.S. or in El Salvador. Attorney General Pam Bondi told reporters yesterday that Abrego Garcia will not be returning to the U.S.
He is not coming back to our country. President Bukele said he was not sending him back. That's the end of the story. If he wanted to send him back, we would give him a plane ride back. There was no situation ever where he was going to stay in this country. None.
We have NBC News legal analyst Danny Savallo standing by to help unpack this for us. But first, let's get to NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell and NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach, who join us now from Washington with the latest. Good morning to you all. Gary, after this pressure has mounted from the courts, the Justice Department released documents from 2019 with details about Abrego Garcia. This is all relating to claims that he was a member of MS-13. What have we learned from those documents?
Yes, Stephen, for weeks now, the Trump administration has been claiming without providing evidence that he is a member of MS-13. We now have some of the documents that makes them believe that is the case. And they all come from 2019 immigration proceedings where Abrego Garcia was arrested and by Prince George's County officials. And a gang task force member wrote that they believe he's a gang member because he was wearing a Chicago's Bulls hat and a hoodie with rolls of money covering the eyes, ears, and mouth of presidents on American currency. That's something the gang task force member said is a sign of affiliation with the MS-13 gang. Now, the documents also show back in 2019, he was arrested alongside members of MS-13. The White House has also called Abrego Garcia a foreign terrorist and a human smuggler. They have provided no evidence to show that is the case.
So, Kelly, Maryland's Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, he actually traveled to El Salvador yesterday trying to get any information on Abrego Garcia's whereabouts. Tell us more about this visit.
Well, it was ultimately a frustrating visit for Senator Van Hollen. And, of course, Abrego Garcia has been living in Maryland. He has an American wife and American children who are residents of Maryland. And he went there hoping to be able to do a sort of wellness check. Could he see Abrego Garcia? Could he determine how he is being held? What is his current condition? Those kinds of things. And that was rebuffed. He talked about this with reporters during his visit.
I asked the vice president if Abrego Garcia has not committed a crime, why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CICOT? And his answer was that the Trump administration is paying El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, to keep him at CCOP.
So Van Hollen was able to meet with the vice president of El Salvador, not with Abrego Garcia. And he also asked if he came back next week, would he be able to see Abrego Garcia and see what his state is at this point? And they could not provide any sort of assurance about that. Now, the White House has taken on Van Hollen and Democrats broadly for their support for this man and have been very aggressive in saying that this is the wrong side for Democrats to be on. They argue that the president has certainly a lot of public support to go after immigration issues very aggressively like this. Of course, there's a debate about what evidence, for what time period would he be detained in that prison, and many questions that continue. So Van Hollen is certainly trying to keep this in the news as a Maryland-based issue, while there are a lot of other issues of due process and certainly the larger issues of immigration.
And Gary, more fallout from this debate. Two judges have now publicly opened the door for potential contempt proceedings for the Trump administration. What would happen next there?
So, yeah, two different cases here with two different judges. I'll start with the alien enemies case here in D.C. before Judge Boasberg. What has to happen there, the judge has decided the government either has to provide time before a judge for every single one of the Venezuelan members of TDA that were sent to that CCOP prison, or if the government doesn't want to do that, they have to provide the names of the people who made the decision not to turn around those planes after the judge told them to do so that March 15th. So that's the Alien Enemies Act case. Over in Maryland, in the Abrego Garcia case by Monday, the government has to provide answers to questions and has to provide names of people that they're going to have deposed in that case to find out answers to why they did not obey the judge's order.
And Kelly, we heard from the president this week that he's considering sending what he calls homegrown criminals to El Salvador's prison, something that's raising a ton of legal questions here. Any developments there?
Multiple occasions now. This would involve U.S. citizens who he described as having committed violent crimes being taken out of the country and housed in a prison like El Salvador. When he was with the Salvadoran president, he talked about him needing to build more prisons. Again, the U.S. is paying El Salvador for the incarceration of these migrants that we've been talking about. And the White House is saying that the counsel's office and the Department of Justice are looking into the legal issues. The president did also say it would have to be within the law. It's very hard to see how that would be within the law because the Constitution gives lots of protections to U.S. citizens to guard against this kind of situation. And yet the president is persisting in saying he thinks it could be a good idea and wants to pursue it. We've seen over time when the president repeatedly talks about issues that he thinks are important on a variety of issues, that the administration then tries to work toward looking for legal justifications or pathways to bear that out. So we'll see where this goes, but there are huge constitutional issues that are raised by even this suggestion.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, Gary Grumbach, thank you both.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, who's been helping break down so many of these legal issues for us this week. All right, so as we heard there, we've got now two judges threatening the Trump administration with the possibility of contempt proceedings if they don't comply. So if they don't comply, then what happens next?
Yeah, judges are now tiptoeing ever so daintily towards contempt. And I say that because I think that we would have been in contempt land long ago. But what I believe is happening, and understandably so, is that federal judges are really, really reluctant to hold the administration in criminal contempt. They really don't want to do that because the really complicated issue then becomes who exactly do you hold in contempt? Members of the executive branch have been held in contempt before, but it's been largely for defiance of congressional subpoenas. This situation may be a brand new one, and it is something that I do not envy any judge who has to hold an administration in contempt and decide who exactly should be held in contempt. Is it the attorney general? Is it a line prosecutor? Is it the president himself? That's where we're heading, and I suspect that if it weren't the administration, we would have been here days, if not weeks ago.
And we faced this before, potential criminal charges for a sitting president. Is that possible for these criminal contempt charges?
It is impossible to charge a sitting president. That is probably the clearest issue of immunity, even before the Supreme Court's immunity decision last year. While a president is in office, he simply cannot be prosecuted. Now, there are lots of open questions about what happens after somebody leaves office. And as we have seen, a president who leaves office is amenable to prosecution. But if he's exercising his core presidential powers, then probably not. In fact, even evidence of that exercise of core presidential powers is likely inadmissible. So what you might see is if a contempt order is issued, you might see the executive branch saying, hey, well, since we're within the executive branch, we're immune. You can't touch us. This will be a constitutional showdown. That's why federal judges, they may not admit it, they do not want to be the one to have to hold the administration in contempt.
Let's talk about another issue that's been making headlines, and that is some of the actions the Trump administration has been taking against law firms that it sees as unfriendly toward it. Now, some pushback. We've got a federal judge blocking this new executive order from the president yesterday that punished one prominent law firm. That firm had successfully sued the news, Fox News, for promoting those false claims of election fraud. You might remember a few years ago. The judge called the order a, quote, shocking abuse of power. Is there a precedent for punishing a law firm for winning a case? I mean, talk about where we're at right now with this legal issue.
So this is an issue I'm obviously biased on because as an attorney and having many colleagues and friends who are in these major law firms, I guess I have to say I feel a little protective of the legal profession. So forgive my bias. But this to me is playing out exactly as I predicted or thought it might, because when you attack law firms for their exercise of their First Amendment rights. And it is clear that advocacy to a court, litigating, arguing to a judge is a form of protected First Amendment speech. In fact, is arguably in the highest tier of First Amendment protection. And if you target someone, and that's someone including a law firm, for that speech, it stands to follow that that would be an unconstitutional infringement on First Amendment rights. Now, the government might likely argue, hey, well, if we're talking about canceling government contracts, we're the government, we can contract with whomever we like. That might be the hill they want to try and die on. But in this case, in these cases, it appears that the law is pretty plain here, that you cannot target law firms for their protected speech, and that includes litigating on behalf of clients.
All right, Danny Savalos, thank you so much as always.
All right, to Wall Street now. It was more bad news for the U.S. stock market yesterday as worries about President Trump's trade war and the impact could have on the global economy continues to worry investors.
All three major indices dipped on Wednesday, with chipmakers leading the sell-off. Stocks also pushed lower after the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell spoke. His comments were carefully worded but cautionary, warning tariffs could push inflation higher.
NBC News senior policy reporter Shannon Pettypiece joins us now with more. Shannon, good morning to you. So let's talk about a Fed Chair Jerome Powell and someone whose words can move the markets on their own. He spoke yesterday about tariffs and market volatility, warning about inflation, higher costs for American consumers. Did he mention the Fed's interest rate strategy here?
Well, he basically indicated that the Fed is pretty much where a lot of businesses are right now. They're in wait and see mode. They're waiting to see how this policy around tariffs is going to play out. Because remember, it was just a week ago that there were these global tariffs in place, then they were paused. Now there's tariffs on, remaining on China. The president's still talking about tariffs on other items like electronics, pharmaceuticals. So there remains a lot of uncertainty. So Powell said from the Fed's point of view, they're going to sort of hold steady, hold where they are and not make any decisions. The big move they could make is cutting interest rates, which is something that the market was anticipating to see this year. So now there's a bit of question about whether we're going to continue to see those rate cuts. Here's a little bit more about what Chairman Powell had to say.
Tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. The inflationary effects could also be more persistent. Avoiding that outcome will depend on the size of the effects, on how long it takes for them to pass through fully to prices, and ultimately on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored.
So talking there about how this will contribute in some form to inflation, we just don't know how much. And the other key thing he said was to expect, if these tariffs remain in place, unemployment to go up. As growth slows from higher prices and the impact of these tariffs, unemployment he anticipates will go higher.
Beyond Powell's comments, Shannon, just walk us through what we did see in the markets yesterday. I mean, why were chip makers like NVIDIA hit so hard?
I mean, I think it kind of it speaks to this overall uncertainty that we continue to see. The day started off, this chip maker, NVIDIA, had been intending to be able to sell a certain type of chip to China, despite a lot of restrictions already in place. They thought they had a chip they could sell to China. Then the administration came out and said, no, you can't even sell that one to China. That is going to cost the company $5 billion. So then that started creating more uncertainty among what is ahead, and for chip makers, for semiconductor makers, sending shares of those companies down. Then there were those comments by Powell. So I think it just speaks to this continued back and forth on tariff policy from one day to the next. Companies don't know what's coming, and you're seeing that reflected in the markets.
And zooming out a bit on the tariff discussion, the Trump administration saying the tariffs are a way of bringing countries to the negotiating table here. So does the White House have anything to show for this strategy that may be working on that?
So they were touting a meeting they had yesterday with Japan, of course, one of the U.S.'s most important trading partners. I've been talking to some former officials who've worked on past trade negotiations of what to expect here in this condensed timeline. You know, they said we're probably not going to be seeing some sort of big, wide, sweeping new trade deals that overhaul or revamp the way we do trade with other countries. But there might be some little wins here and there. Maybe a country lowering tariff rates on certain goods or agreeing to buy a certain amount of U.S. products, sort of try and level the trade deficit there. But there's a lot the administration is trying to get done in a very short period of time. Trade deals can take months, if not years, involve dozens of people across agencies. So it's a real lofty task, but the administration is trying to show signs that they are moving forward and making progress here.
A lot of moving pieces. Shannon Pettypiece, we appreciate it.
Just one day after a CDC report found a dramatic increase in autism rates among children, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made controversial comments about the root cause of the developmental disability. Speaking at length, Kennedy suggested environmental exposure is to blame, but presented no proof. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson has the details.
The nation's top health official, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., doubling down on his claim that there is an autism epidemic.
Year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase.
The Health and Human Services Secretary pointed to the CDC's own data, showing autism prevalence increased from 1 in 150 8-year-olds in 2000 to 1 in 31 in 2022. Then he offered his own theory for the rise without proof.
This is a preventable disease. We know it's an environmental exposure. It has to be. Genes do not cause epidemics.
Dr. Zach Warren, one of the authors of the CDC report, says there is no one answer, but the best science so far points to genetics.
We have data that a certain percentage of some types of autism can be clearly explained by genetic differences. We have other evidence suggesting that actually it's the complex interplay of environmental factors and all of those things that can influence brain development that we'll need to understand as well.
Is it a preventable disease?
I think it's really challenging to answer that question because autism isn't actually a single thing, right? Autism is a word that we use as a best attempt to capture a wide variety of wonderfully unique children with strengths, developmental vulnerabilities.
Kennedy painted a bleak picture for those with autism.
And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date.
Sam Branson has a PhD in physics and is an autism researcher. Both Sam and his 7-year-old son have autism.
We have, I think, vibrant futures. And yeah, to hear someone who's a government official, calling us an epidemic and, essentially labeling us as negative outcomes is quite harmful.
Secretary Kennedy says the government will study what he believes are potential factors, including food additives, mold, and pesticide. He says he will follow the science wherever it leads, and he hopes to have some answers starting in September. Back to you.
All right, Ann, thank you.
Well, time now for weather. And as Easter weekend approaches, millions are bracing for severe weather risks starting this morning.
Angie Lastman is here with the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We're rolling into, of course, a holiday weekend, and things are going to get quite busy from this point through the weekend. We've got already a winter alerts up for parts of the West. Notice the winter storm warnings, the winter weather advisories across the Rockies as snow has already started to fall for folks there. We've got some of these showers that we're expecting across parts of the Midwest. Kansas City waking up to some wet weather this morning. But this is just the beginning of it. We're really going to start to see things ramp up as the day goes on and into the next couple of days. Today, it's going to be the snow across Wyoming and specifically Colorado. We could see some pretty impressive snowfall rates, 1 to 2 inches per hour. But also notice some of these storms that are going to fire up, stretching from Nebraska to Iowa and to Missouri, and then eventually working their way a little farther to the north and east as the evening gets underway. Here's the area, though, in the afternoon hours that we're watching for potentially strong to even severe storms. Omaha, right in the bullseye of that enhanced risk, mainly looking for damaging hail, but of course the wind gusts and isolated tornadoes can't be ruled out. Looking ahead to your Friday, rounding out the work week with still some of that snow across parts of Colorado, specifically the Denver metro area, going to pick up some significant snowfall. And then we start to see that severe threat really stretch from Michigan all the way to Texas. So Oklahoma City, St. Louis, Detroit, Chicago, all included in that hail, once again, that greatest threat. By Saturday, we're not done with this system just yet. Now we've got the severe storms from Missouri to Texas, but we've also got a flood threat that's going to be underway as well. Dallas into Little Rock and up into portions of St. Louis, Lexington, all could see the potential for some of those stronger storms as your Saturday gets going. And by Sunday, still dealing with this intense storm system, it's going to see some of those stronger storms develop across parts of the plains. That severe risk will really ramp up into the afternoon. Guys, this is going to be problematic, of course, for travel. We know people are going to be out and about, want to get their Easter egg hunts underway. This will be something they'll have to pay attention to.
Keep an eye on the forecast.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Well, much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, too quiet on set. Hollywood productions on a double-digit decline, with more movies being made elsewhere. We'll go behind the scenes to find out why.
Up first after the break, a consequential ruling causing controversy overseas, how it could limit the rights of the trans community across the UK. We'll be right back. We're back now with a landmark court ruling overseas. It could potentially uproot the legal rights of the transgender community across the UK. In an 88-page decision, Britain's Supreme Court yesterday determined trans women cannot legally be defined as women. Supporters of trans rights say the ruling sets civil rights back decades. Opponents, including Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, are calling it a victory. NBC News correspondent Hala Garani has more.
Judgment in the matter of a landmark ruling from the British Supreme Court setting out how women are defined in law.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
In other words, sex is assigned at birth, and trans women, including those who've undergone gender reassignment, are not legally considered women. Activist Jane Fay, director of Transactual UK, is devastated.
Because effectively what this decision does is exclude trans people from society.
But outside the court, cheers from supporters of the decision, including from one of the activists who led the campaign.
This is not about prejudice or bigotry, as some people would say. It's just about saying that there are differences, and biology is one of those differences.
In its ruling, the UK Supreme Court stressed that this legal definition does not strip trans rights, as they would still be protected by anti-discrimination laws. But the decision could affect policy decisions related to participation in sports, the military, and female-only spaces, among other areas.
It's going to take a generation to bring us back. I will be gone before we see happier times here.
Both critics and supporters of the ruling drawing parallels with President Trump's legislation regarding transgender Americans.
There are only two genders, male and female.
The Trump administration, which has banned trans students from competing in girls' sports, suing the state of Maine for failing to comply with that executive order. In the UK, the legal battle that ended the highest court started when the Scottish Parliament passed a 2018 law requiring public boards to be composed of 50% men and 50% women, including trans women in the definition of women, something the campaigners opposed. One of the highest profile supporters of the campaign, Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, took to X to celebrate the ruling. They've protected the rights of women and girls across the UK. I'm so proud to know you, continuing to tweet for hours as reactions rolled in.
All right, thanks to Hala Garani for that report. The court also said trans people would still be protected from discrimination based on gender reassignment, and a trans woman could claim sex discrimination because she is perceived to be a woman.
More international news now. The American pastor who was kidnapped at gunpoint nearly a week ago in South Africa has now been rescued after a deadly shootout. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons reports.
This is your missionary Josh Sullivan here.
Tennessee pastor Josh Sullivan is safe after a deadly shootout between his abductors and police. He was kidnapped last Thursday in front of his wife and 6 children, the youngest 2 years old. His relieved father-in-law telling NBC News he got a phone call from a family member following 5 frightening days.
So I answered it immediately and basically just dropped to my knees. His words were, "We got him." And I just thank God.
Police still searching the house where Pastor Sullivan was rescued. Outside, 3 abductors were killed as they tried to escape with Sullivan in a vehicle.
3 came out dead. Josh came out alive. He was in the same vehicle that was filled with bullets. So there's that's 100% God.
Hope you can see the sign here of our church.
This gang in a township in Eastern Cape had been demanding a ransom after pulling Sullivan from the pulpit of the Baptist church he had founded and filmed in this YouTube video.
I spoke with him last night, and very extremely brief. And his words were that he loved me, and my words to him were that I loved him.
Now, Josh Sullivan's family say he is unharmed and reunited with his wife and children. The prayers of his community answered.
A harrowing situation. Keir, thanks for that report.
Israel's defense minister says the fighting will continue in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria as ceasefire talks continue.
International correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome with more. Claudio, good morning.
Stephen, Joe, good morning. Well, that's right. Israel's defense minister also said that Israeli troops will remain in security buffer areas in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria indefinitely. Now, in a statement, Minister Israel Katz said that unlike in the past, the Israeli military is not evacuating areas that have been cleared and seized and will remain in security zones as a buffer between what he called the enemy and Israeli communities in any temporary or permanent situations in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Now, the remarks could further complicate talks with Hamas over a ceasefire and hostage release deal. And former Peruvian First Lady Nadine Heredia has arrived in Brazil after she was granted asylum there. The former First Lady arrived on Wednesday after she and her husband, former President of Peru, Humala, were sentenced to 15 years in prison for laundering funds received from a Brazilian construction company to finance his presidential campaigns. The former president was immediately jailed while the First Lady was allowed to travel to Brazil under the terms of a diplomatic asylum convention with her youngest son. And Easter has arrived early at the Whipsnade Zoo in England. The keepers treated the animals to a collection of mouth-watering Easter surprises. The lemurs woke up to a bunny-shaped puzzle feeders filled with sweet corn. Penguins were sent on an egg hunt with fish tucked inside colorful cardboard eggs. And ferrets digged into Easter baskets packed with decorated eggs. Well, I'm not sure whether the lambs think all of this is funny, but at least the penguins and ferals are having fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be a tough time of year for rabbits. You know, everyone's eating their ears, and it's just,
And
tough weekend. All right. Thank you so much, Claudio.
Well, speaking of penguins, this morning we're taking a closer look at how computer models that scientists use to protect how hot the Earth is getting are evolving. It turns out those models have a blind spot, which could mean experts have been underestimating global warming. NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane went to Antarctica to see how some of the smallest organisms there affect the entire planet's temperature.
See, this is really high tech.
Seaweed.
These are the sea grapes.
Growing along Antarctica could hold insight about the future because of its long history.
So that's something that usually lives a lot deeper. You don't normally find that washed up on beaches.
Seaweed is actually a type of algae which has been around since before the dinosaurs.
This is snow algae, so they kind of live on the nutrients that are in the snow.
And Freya Aldred hopes to better understand how this ancient organism is responding to today's climate.
No one's really looked at it in that kind of level of detail. We don't really know how much carbon is stored in these things and does it change across the season.
So what happens in Antarctica does not stay in Antarctica.
Alia Khan also studies algae, but she's focused on how it cranks up the heat by absorbing more energy from the sun.
All this bright snow and ice is actually reflecting sun's energy back to space and helping Earth stay a little cooler. And even though it's a tiny change, this yellowish greenish algae that you can see here in the footprints, that is changing the albedo or changing the reflectivity enough that it's just making the entire planet warm even faster.
And when they are actively photosynthesizing, they have a larger impact on the surface albedo because they're bringing extra energy into the snowpack, which dissipates as heat and causes it to melt faster.
She found that red algae absorbs 20% more solar energy and twice as much with green algae, 40%. Now she wants to calculate how pollution does a similar thing, because everything from wildfires to diesel engines and coal power plants produce soot. And that can travel thousands of miles in the air, eventually landing on top of snow.
This process of the impacts of light-absorbing particles is one of these feedback loops that is not currently represented in global climate models.
So would it be fair to say that because we're not currently including this, that climate models might be underestimating how hot the planet's going to get?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Ultimately, our goal is to collect enough data to reduce the uncertainty in our future climate projections.
And for both these scientists, it's a team effort.
Not everyone can get down here, but people that can, we try to get a lot of data that a lot of people can use.
Because at its heart, this work will paint a clearer picture of the future we all share. In Antarctica, I'm national climate reporter Chase Kane.
All right, coming up, a shared struggle. Depression rates in America now nearly double compared with a decade ago. We're going to break down new data by the CDC and why some people are not getting the help they need.
Plus, some promising news for dog lovers about a new pill that could extend the life of man's best friend. This is Morning News Now.
We're back with new data from the CDC that shows rates of depression in the U.S. are increasing. The survey looked at people aged 12 and older. It found more than 1 in 8 reported being depressed in recent years. It's a number that has almost doubled in the last decade.
And that same survey shows it's twice as bad for tween and teen girls. More than 1 in 4 say they have been depressed.
Clinical psychologist Dr. Jennifer Hartstein joins us now with more on this. Doctor, good to have you with us. So do we know why we are seeing these higher depression rates, and just who is at the highest risk of being depressed right now?
Hey, guys, thanks for having me. I mean, I think we are recognizing that there's a lot of factors that are involved in seeing more of this. Some of it is that we are talking about it more. So just in the conversation, we're decreasing the stigma, we're increasing conversation, we're increasing awareness. We know that some cultures are much more open to having these conversations, which is also really important. And listen, we're in a whiplash culture of stressor after stressor after stressor right now. So we are really frustrated and overwhelmed. And all of those challenges add to this sense of uncertainty, this sense of fear, and increases people's depression.
And the survey also revealing that women in general are more likely to have depression than men. Do we know at all why that is?
There's several reasons. One is generally women are more allowed, right? We were kind of able to be more expressive or be able to be more emotional. The good news is that's changing. So hopefully that will continue to change and men can be more expressive. I think also there's the cognitive load issue for women. We carry more. So in carrying more, those stressors impact us more. And therefore we tend to, be more depressed and be more impacted by all the things around us.
Let's look at this number. A big majority of adults and adolescents surveyed said that depression, it's making work, it's making social activities, home life challenging, but still less than half have actually received counseling or therapy. Why are we seeing this large gap here between people who are experiencing the symptoms versus the ones who are actually getting the treatment?
It's a scary discrepancy to look at, right? And that so many people are suffering and so few people are getting support. And I think there's a lot of reasons. And the biggest reason is access to care, right? We don't have enough therapists to provide the support that many people need. And in that, we don't necessarily have access to the means. We don't have insurance companies reimbursing or people having the ability to pay for care. So that discrepancy is impacted by that. And if we can't help them get that additional support, it's going to continue to happen. And there still is stigma around going to therapy, unfortunately, and people are afraid to walk in that office and really know what that means outside of the office.
The issue with therapists, the shortage of them, the lack of coverage from health insurance, from what you've seen, is that an issue that is getting better or worse in just the last few years?
You know, Joe, it's a hard one to answer. I think there is this real motivation to make it better. And yet we still butt heads with insurance companies thinking that physical health and mental health are on equal playing fields, right? And in fact, you can't have one without the other. And although we're looking at who is impacted by this, all of us have mental health and all of us have struggle. So we could all benefit. And I mean, once we kind of make that a more even playing field, I think we'll have greater access.
All right. Dr. Jen Hartstein, as always, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Well, turning now to some medical news for our four-legged friends. There's a groundbreaking clinical trial going on right now that is trying to help man's best friend stick around for a little bit longer. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has the details.
It's a question that's been pondered for the ages by families and dog owners alike. Is there anything that I can do to extend the life of our furry friends? And the answer is possibly, especially when you have a situation where larger dogs on average are living half the life that smaller dogs are. Well, now there's science to suggest that it is, in fact, possible.
For John Young and his 10-year-old dog Reggie, there's no illusion the Spaniel-Collie mix will live forever, but a longer, healthier life with a pill a day would mean everything.
He's been my co-pilot. He's been with me every step of the way as my best friend.
Young is one of more than 1,000 dog owners participating in a first-of-its-kind clinical trial at facilities like this one in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, spearheaded by a Bay Area biotech company, Loyal.
We're going to be following these dogs for over 5 years. Come here.
Founder Celine Haliwa carries a clear mission.
I think we're working on one of the most fundamental and touching problems that most people have felt in their life, right? Everyone has felt the pain of losing an animal.
But I guess the expectation would be, you don't think you're going to add more than 5 years to an animal's life?
No, this is not Immortal Dogs. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. We're going for one healthier year of dog life. Hopefully more, maybe less.
After 1 year of the trial, the FDA gave it a stamp of reasonable expectation of effectiveness, the first for a longevity drug. Loyal is looking to improve metabolic fitness, which Haliwa says historically has impacted bigger dogs more severely.
Will it help larger dogs more?
It's hard to know. There's more to achieve with larger dogs because they have such an artificially short lifespan. But I think it can also really benefit a smaller breed dog, too.
For now, the trial is only for dogs that are at least 10 years old and a certain size.
The minimum weight to participate is 14 pounds because dosing is so much harder for really small dogs. So these two are out for now, but that could change over time.
In the meantime, owners like John don't know if their dog is on the real drug or a placebo beef pill, but he's okay with being a part of history either way.
If you were to tell me, hey, he's getting the placebo,
Yeah.
I would be shocked. Yeah.
Just because it feels like you're seeing changes in his behavior.
I am, yeah. I really am.
Hope on the horizon.
Good boy.
For man's best friend.
And there's more good news here. Loyal is trying to get those drugs to market within the next year or so at a price point of less than $100 a month, although, of course, it's going to depend on the size of the dog. But the idea is to make the medications as accessible as possible to all families. Sam Brock, NBC News. Back to you.
Wanted to work for some Pomeranians that I know. That'd be exciting stuff. All right, Sam, thank you. Well, coming up, trouble in Tinseltown. More and more movies being made outside of Hollywood. The changes that are renewing concerns about the struggling film industry.
And Los Angeles is looking golden ahead of the 2028 Olympics. We're going to show you some of the venues set to host the games. You're watching Morning News Now.
why do I shoot my game show, the American Game Show, the floor in Ireland?
That's interesting that you shoot the floor there.
It's cheaper to bring 100 American people to Ireland than to walk across the lot at Fox.
Right.
Past the sound stages and do it there.
Crazy.
That was NBC's Parks and Rec alums Adam Scott and Rob Lowe discussing how few television projects actually film in Los Angeles anymore.
Yeah, so the nonprofit Film LA revealed in a recent report, TV production in LA dropped nearly 59% in the last 3 years, and some experts say it is largely due to higher costs.
Entertainment journalist, pop culture whiz, and esteemed friend of the show, Brian Balthazar, joins us now for more on this. Brian, good morning to you. So we know film and TV productions are some of California's highest profile industry. So do we know why we're seeing this type of drop in productions?
Yeah, good morning. So first of all, there's been a cutback in production and commissioning of shows overall. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, when streamers were all jockeying for first position, they all wanted a lot of volume and they were operating at a loss. Well, that's not sustainable, obviously. So they cut back on the number of shows and focusing on profitability. Oh, I got that out there. Profitability over volume. Another issue is the out-of-state and international competition, as Rob Lowe just referenced. You know, it's becoming more and more of an incentive to go into other states, which are sweetening the deal with these incredible tax incentives, which when you combine the higher cost of doing business in LA and those limited tax incentives, it's kind of a no-brainer for producers. Then we had the perfect storm of writer strikes, director strikes, a pandemic, and even wildfires that affect shooting locations in that area.
Yeah, the fires are a big issue now. So Rob Lowe mentions Ireland, but where are some of California's biggest competitors these days?
Well, we've heard a lot about Atlanta, obviously. We've seen Tyler Perry built an enormous studio there. New York has a $700 million cap on their credits, which actually is double the amount that California currently allots for film production and TV production, which is kind of shocking, actually. So you have Stranger Things is one of the shows that's shooting in Atlanta. In New Jersey, you have Severance. But Hallmark movies, this one might shock you. Hallmark movies you're seeing produced in, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania because of the incentives there. Ireland, to name that tune, and the floor shot there. So all over the world, really, because they're offering these incredible tax incentives.
Wow. So Governor Gavin Newsom obviously trying to expand California's film and television tax credit program to bring productions back to LA. So what are some of the changes he's looking at here, and how would they affect the workers in the industry?
Right. So he's currently asking that we double that production credit amount to $700 million to basically match actually what New York is already doing. Of course, that has to pass through the legislation, and California is already operating at a deficit. So that's the challenge. They're also looking at basically giving more refundable tax credits, because there's a way that you kind of have to not fudge the numbers. You have to work the numbers, and it has currently been more favorable to big production houses to then have higher taxes that they owe. So by making them refundable, and we're getting deep into the weeds here, but it makes it a little bit easier for smaller productions to benefit from those. And it's incredibly important because the film industry and all of that work expands far beyond the film industry itself in a way, because we're talking caterers, we're talking drivers, we're talking hotels. The amount of money that production can bring into an area is enormous.
So real quick, Brian, I mean, if things don't turn around, are there fears that the glitzy, glamorous Hollywood that we've grown accustomed to seeing just won't exist anymore?
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because people often go to LA because of Hollywood. They go to see the sound stages. They want to see a sitcom being shot or maybe run into a celebrity. And the more that these things are being outsourced, that's a very big deal. You know, we were just talking about LA being excited for the Olympics. They need that there right now because Hollywood isn't bringing them the glitz and glamour. And there's been talk about what happened to Detroit when automation and the automotive industry started doing automation and outsourcing some of their process. And they're worried that that could be what happens to Los Angeles.
You might have to go to Ireland to see some of those movie stars. All right, Brian Balthazar, thanks so much.
All right, let's take a look at what is making financial headlines this morning. Ford might have to up the prices on its cars starting as soon as next month.
CNBC's Silvana now joins us with that and more. Good morning, Silvana.
Hey, Stephen. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, so Ford has told dealers it may raise prices on new vehicles next month if President Trump's tariffs on autos remain in place. Now, Automotive News, citing a company memo, says customers likely won't see the increase until early July. Ford won't hike sticker prices on any vehicle currently on the lot at Ford and Lincoln dealers. American Airlines will start offering free in-flight Wi-Fi next year in a partnership with AT&T. American says it will be available exclusively to members of its frequent flyer program, and it expects 90% of its fleet to be equipped by the launch in January. Delta began offering free Wi-Fi to frequent flyers in 2023, and United tapped Elon Musk's Starlink for in-flight internet service last year. And airports typically don't have cheap food and drink options, right? So Istanbul Airport has just been named the world's most expensive for dining by Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera. Turkey's primary airport charges travelers nearly $20 for a beer and almost $7 for a banana. Even a combo meal from McDonald's costs upwards of $30. Istanbul is also one of the world's busiest airports with 220,000 passengers per day, guys.
Oh, a lot of $7 bananas there. All right. Thanks, Savannah. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, in 2028, Los Angeles will play host to the Olympics for the third time, and now we're getting a sense of some of the famous and more obscure venues that will play host to those Summer Olympics. Los Angeles is now getting ready for its close-up and showing off the locations that will be the backdrop to the world's best athletes going for gold. Here's NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz with more.
While there might be more than 1,100 days until the LA Olympics, the countdown is on. Some of the city's most iconic locations just locked in as venues for the 2028 Summer Games. From Dodger Stadium, which will host baseball, to the sprawling California coast. Venice Beach, home to the triathlon. The sands of Long Beach, beach volleyball. And farther south in San Clemente, the epic waves at Trestles Beach, the site for surfing.
We have such amazing places for these athletes to compete at their best. And guess what? We don't have to build any of them. They're already here.
5 new or returning events have also been announced. Softball, lacrosse, cricket, flag football, and the racket sport of squash, which will be held on the Universal Studios backlot. The exact location? Wait for it. Right here, the famous Courthouse Square, where more than 1,000 different movies have been filmed, like Bye Bye Birdie, To Kill a Mockingbird, and yes, Back to the Future.
Great Scott!
Like Paris, which held events beneath the Eiffel Tower and at Versailles, Los Angeles also hoping to highlight the best of the City of Angels. The Santa Anita Racetrack will be home to equestrian events, the LA Coliseum track and field, and gymnastics at Crypto.com Arena. UCLA will transform into the Olympic Village. The Olympic handoff to Los Angeles, a star-studded affair filled with dramatic stunts like something only out of Hollywood. A sneak peek of what we can expect when all eyes turn to LA for the 2028 Games. Liz Kreutz, NBC News.
That's so cool. So often they're putting the final touches on the Olympic venues like days before. In LA, they're like, oh, we got a lot of it done already. Good to go. All right, coming up. Who's a good boy? A ranch dog in Arizona being credited for the rescue of a 2-year-old who wandered miles away from home.
And more dog stories for you. How this real-life lassie got the little boy back safely. Don't pause your devices. Morning News Now. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Spring is in the air, and one bird is hitting the city in search of the Harry to her Sally. Meet Astoria. The wild turkey got her name because she was first spotted over in Queens, where one neighborhood's called Astoria, but it turns out she is an uptown girl at heart. The New York Times reports Astoria's visit to Manhattan last year included trips to luxury retailers and high-end restaurants near Park Avenue. Well, now dedicated bird watchers say she's back. This time she's ruffling feathers around wealthy neighborhoods on the Upper East Side. So there's a bit of a trend here. The skyscrapers in New York might be high, but they're no match for Astoria's spendy standards. It's a fancy turkey.
Such a fancy bird. I love that. Astoria. Well, got to look her up. Well, finally this hour, a wild rescue in Arizona by a real-life lassie. I love this story. A toddler was lost in the Arizona wilderness, but found miles away from home and brought back to safety, all thanks to that ranch dog. NBC News Stay Tuned correspondent Marquise Francis brings us that story.
On Scotty Dutton's ranch, Buford, come on. His dog Buford protects the property nightly. But Tuesday morning, Dutton says he came across something else.
I see Buford coming down the deal right there with a little blonde-haired boy with him.
Like a scene straight out of Lassie.
And, of course, Lassie.
Dutton says he recognized the boy immediately.
I had heard that morning about the missing child, so I knew it was him.
Police say a 2-year-old wandered from his home in Seligman, Arizona, about 100 miles south of the Grand Canyon. His parents reported him missing the night before. The sheriff's office there launching a 16-hour search. The toddler trekking a whole 7 miles from home. A long journey that Dutton says could have been extremely dangerous even for an adult.
He lucked out there. The terrain's really rough. We got mountain lions, coyotes, he had a lot of stuff to deal with for as long a hike as he made.
Dutton says the boy was a little shaken up with a few scratches, but he was mostly fine.
I was so happy to find that little guy and make sure he was okay and getting back to his parents. I'm just really, really glad that he wasn't hurt.
In the end, it looks like man's best friend made the rescue. Marquise Francis, NBC News.
Love that dog. Just chilling out now.
That's going to do it for this hour. Morning news now.
Your news continues right now.
Good Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Stephen Romo in for Savannah today. And right now on Morning News Now, the brewing immigration standoff between President Trump and the courts. A federal judge threatening to hold the administration in contempt for ignoring an order to pause those deportation flights back in March. It comes as the White House ramps up the rhetoric over a man with no criminal record who was mistakenly sent to an El Salvador prison.
Nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again.
The new push from one top Democratic lawmaker to bring him home. Market mayhem, more anxiety on Wall Street this morning, fueled by yet another steep sell-off during trading yesterday. The Dow closing nearly 700 points in the red after Fed Chair Jay Powell warns President Trump's sweeping tariffs could drive up inflation. So how are the major indices reacting this morning? We're watching your wallet in just a moment. Plus, a possible medical game changer that could make thousands of patients' weight loss journeys a whole lot easier in the near future. We'll tell you about a scientific breakthrough from one big drug maker showing new promise for one powerful little pill. And it was a cultural phenomenon that had Americans glued to their TVs for 9 gut-busting seasons. But in 2025, 20 years after they were first introduced to us, the cast of The Office sitting down with Joe for an exclusive look back on a legacy that's still bringing in new fans. Such a rewatchable show.
Exactly. They are the nicest group of people, and they are all still incredibly close, which was really cool to see.
Love to hear that. But we begin this morning with the growing immigration standoff between the Trump administration and the courts. A federal judge now finding probable cause to hold the administration in criminal contempt for violating his order to temporarily stop deportation flights that were removing migrants from the U.S. last month.
This comes as the administration faces mounting pressure over the fate of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. The Justice Department released records yesterday detailing how Maryland police assessed he was a member of MS-13 during an arrest in 2019. Abrego Garcia's family denies he was in the violent gang. The White House said yesterday Abrego Garcia will, quote, never live in the U.S. again. NBC News senior Washington correspondent, News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has the latest. Hallie, good morning.
Hi there. Yeah, the Trump administration is now appealing, but this is the latest and most dramatic example of the growing tension between the executive branch and the judicial branch, the federal courts, as the Trump administration tests the limits of its executive power and several legal fights over the president's immigration moves set to hit a new level.
An extraordinary escalation this morning between President Trump and the federal courts. The Trump administration appealing overnight after a judge threatened criminal contempt against them, saying officials ignored his order to turn around deportation flights headed to El Salvador last month. Judge James Boasberg writing, "The Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders." The judge writing, "Contempt proceedings will start if those hundreds of Venezuelan migrants don't get a chance to legally challenge their removal." The clash coming just hours after another federal judge chastised the administration for ignoring a Supreme Court ruling to facilitate the return of a man mistakenly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was removed from the U.S. because of what the Justice Department called an administrative error.
If he ever ends up back in the United States, he would immediately be deported again.
The Justice Department also releasing documents in an attempt to show Abrego Garcia is a violent gang member, pointing to a 2019 report from Maryland police that linked him to MS-13. His lawyer and family have denied any gang affiliation, and he's never been charged with any crime. The administration also releasing this, showing his wife requested a restraining order in 2021. She now says in a statement that she acted out of caution after surviving domestic violence in a previous relationship. Maryland Senator Democrat Chris Van Hollen traveling to El Salvador to press for Abrego Garcia's release, saying officials there denied his request to meet with him.
This is simply about letting him have his day in court.
So as far as what's next here, the government is facing deadlines in both of those deportation cases within the next week, as we're also waiting for responses from the appeals court for more on where this goes next. Back to you.
Ali, thank you.
Well, President Trump's trade war is continuing to weigh on investors after all three major U.S. indices closed in the red on Wednesday. Chip makers like NVIDIA led the sell-off, but a warning from the Federal Reserve chairman about tariffs driving up prices for consumers also contributed to that market downturn. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now with the latest on all this. Garrett.
Hey, Stephen. Good morning. Look, even with some of the president's most recent tariffs on pause, their drag on the U.S. economy continues. Stocks sliding again yesterday, and businesses large and small struggling to adapt as here at the White House, new trade negotiations are just getting underway. Back in the spotlight this morning, President Trump's sweeping global trade war. The stock market sinking again Wednesday, the tech-heavy NASDAQ down more than 3%, amid new warnings about the impact of Trump tariff policies from the Federal Reserve chairman.
Tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. The inflationary effects could also be more persistent.
To the World Trade Organization, which said in a new report that the outlook for global trade has, quote, deteriorated sharply due to a surge in tariffs and trade policy uncertainty. That uncertainty rattling businesses nationwide, from Wisconsin farmers who can't sell their crops thanks to retaliatory tariffs.
The gentleman that bought our product in China just wants to hold because he can't afford to pay the tariff right now.
To toy stores in California that can't afford to stock their shelves.
It's very, very scary because, you know, it feels like everything we work for is like it's go toward tax.
The Golden State's governor filing a lawsuit against the federal government Wednesday, claiming President Trump lacks the authority to unilaterally implement the tariffs, inflicting billions of dollars in damages to the state's economy.
No state is poised to lose more than the state of California. This is recklessness at another level.
The president defending his tariffs, falsely inflating the revenue they've brought in.
We were making $2 billion and $3 billion a day. We never made money like that. It could replace the income tax. That's the kind of money.
It's incredible.
But Customs and Border Protection, the agency which collects the tariffs, told CNBC in a statement that they've brought in $500 million in tariff revenue since April 5th and $21 billion in total since Inauguration Day. The president now focused on hammering out new trade deals, meeting with a Japanese delegation at the White House Wednesday, later posting big progress. And here at the White House today, the president will host Italy's prime minister for a series of meetings expected to touch on trade and tariffs. President Trump already been active on social media this morning, including blasting the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, seemingly in response to that warning about inflation, saying that Powell's termination, quote, cannot come soon enough. But Powell and most experts on the matter believe Trump cannot legally fire him before his term ends next year. Stephen?
All right. Garrett Haake, thank you.
Let's get more on all this with NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Good to have you with us. So let's first talk about what happened in the markets yesterday, especially with chip makers like NVIDIA and why things plummeted, and also just what things are looking like today.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bad day after we heard the commentary from the Fed chair describing the situation on tariffs as one where we could potentially see slower growth and higher inflation in this country. That led the Dow Jones to fall by about 2%, the S&P 500 falling over 2%, and then the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite falling by 3%. The reason why why that was kind of the case for those tech stocks is because of NVIDIA, as you mentioned. This is maybe not a household name, but it's a big one on Wall Street. They're over $2.5 trillion in market cap, I believe. And they reported that they would be taking a $5.5 billion hit as a result of the export controls that the U.S. government had been placing on their ability to sell chips to China. So all of these storylines that are kind of playing into the stock market sell-off that is kind of extending its volatility over the past few weeks is still the tariffs.
So hard to keep up with all of these subplots going on here. We heard from Garrett just briefly about Jerome Powell's speech he gave, the Fed chair. What more did he say about the tariffs and the markets? And did he say at all when the Fed might try to intervene to help?
Yeah, well, the Federal Reserve, as a reminder, is the central bank that kind of levers interest rates to steer the economy. So when he speaks and talks about the economy, we all need to listen because he really has the best kind of overview over what's going on. And he's saying that the tariffs are significantly higher than he had expected. And for that reason, there is a real risk that we could see slower growth, higher inflation, and even down the line, perhaps unemployment going up as well. But what's interesting is that, as Garrett was just mentioning, just this morning, the president is reacting, saying that his termination cannot come fast enough, suggesting that he might be interested in firing the Fed chairman as a result of maybe some of those remarks yesterday. And as of late, again, there is some legal ambiguity over whether or not he can do so. But this just underscores that if he tries to get rid of the person that's steering our U.S. economy, what's that going to do? Likely introduce even further volatility into the financial markets, as a lot of people say, OK, well, if we don't even know if he's going to be fired, what's that going to do to the overall economy?
The average person right now is looking at their investments, they're looking at their 401k, and they're feeling a little bit depressed each day when they look at it. What is the best advice from experts still right now?
Well, first, to not look, close that screen, don't log in, especially if you're talking about money that you're squirreling away for 10, 20, 30 years anyway, because the idea is that you shouldn't let a few weeks of, volatility, which has been unnerving, steer you off of your investment strategy, because you don't want to pull the money out, take a hit because you're taking money out of a retirement account that you're not supposed to be taking out of. So just stay the course. But for those that are entering retirement or thinking about retiring soon and need that money, talk to a financial advisor to see if there are tax loss harvesting strategies or ways that you can kind of reallocate your securities to make sure that you properly take advantage of those funds and try to avoid the worst of it, with the markets being definitely deeply in the red.
All right, Brian Chung, as always, appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, speaking of tariffs, China is among the countries being hit hardest by them. NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer visited a Chinese factory that makes hair accessories to find out how the trade war is affecting them.
Hey guys, good morning. China has long been considered the world's factory, producing the multitude of goods, things like beautiful high-end hair clips that people use or wear every day. But with tariffs on Chinese goods now at 145% and global markets sliding, the trade war is impacting production lines here that are now sending less to the U.S.
E-commerce giants Shein and Temu are planning to raise prices on items coming from China. It's put cities like Yiwu on the front line of President Trump's trade war.
Thousands of colors. 1,000 colors.
Yeah. Nicole Zhang and her husband make hair accessories for major brands that are machine cut and hand finished.
6 million. Yeah, pieces. Yeah. And how many of those are going to the U.S.?
I think around 60 to 70%.
60 to 70%?
Yeah, to USA.
But with tariffs soaring, U.S. clients like Target halted orders.
They want to see what will happen in the future.
So Target put a hold on 2 shipping containers full of your products?
Yeah.
The impact of tariffs in full view here, inside the world's largest wholesale market, where the Chinese goods Americans rely on go for miles. But the dozen vendors we spoke to here, selling everything from socks to keychains to Christmas decor, told us any business they still had with the U.S. is either down or gone. Zero orders now for her press-on nails, she says, because the tax is too high. Some U.S. clients are still buying. Vicky and Vivian Ng are sisters from Chicago who sell hair clips to retailers mostly in the Midwest and Florida.
They're just like us, like they can't have an empty store, right? Or they can't not bring any new product in.
They're hoping the trade spat will blow over before they need to raise prices.
We just want to make stuff that other people, like other women and girls like.
Small pleasures.
Yeah, it's the small things.
Chinese manufacturers say they're making more for other markets and wondering where Americans will get their stuff.
factories here are still producing for China and other markets. This company does a lot of business with the Middle East and Europe. Several countries are negotiating with the Trump administration to reduce tariffs, but China is not one of them. So when all of these accessories get sent off to the U.S., because that's where they're heading, they're likely to cost you more. Guys?
All right,
Thank you, Janice.
Thanks.
Now to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s controversial new comments on autism. In his first news conference as health secretary, Kennedy addressed the CDC's latest report on the rising number of children being diagnosed.
Yeah, Kennedy has promised to figure out the cause of autism, but some experts are questioning how his department will conduct that research. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson joins us now with more on this. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning, Steve and Joe. Without proof, RFK Jr. suggested environmental exposures like food or medicine are likely contributing to those increased autism rates in children. And despite evidence that suggests there is no one single cause for autism, Kennedy is vowing to uncover an underlying reason by September.
Speaking for nearly 30 minutes, the nation's top health official, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., taking aim at the CDC's latest report on rising autism rates.
This is a preventable disease. We know it's an environmental exposure.
The report, released Tuesday, says 1 in 31 8-year-olds were identified with autism spectrum disorder in 2022, up from 1 in 36 in 2020. RFK Jr. discounting the CDC's own previous finding that genetic predisposition is a risk factor in developing autism, and doubling down on his assertion that it's an epidemic.
Genes do not cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin.
Dr. Zach Warren is one of the authors of the CDC report.
We have data that a certain percentage of some types of autism can be clearly explained by genetic differences. We have other evidence suggesting that actually it's the complex interplay of environmental factors.
RFK Jr.'s bleak description of people living with autism causing outrage.
Autism destroys families. These are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children, and we need to put an end to it.
It is demeaning, it is dehumanizing, and it is flat out wrong.
Sam Branson has a PhD in physics and is an autism researcher. He and his 7-year-old son both have autism.
I think a lot of autistic people have quite a bit to contribute to the world.
Kennedy says he plans to provide more autism data in real time, adding that he'll direct resources to studying environmental factors, exposures, and external factors.
And that's where we're going to find the answer.
So what is the government going to look at? Well, Kennedy says they will survey factors such as mold, pesticides, obesity, food additives, and even the age of parents. Pediatricians and other health experts have said the increase in autism diagnoses are largely due to greater awareness and better surveillance of the disorder. And remember that the definition has been broadened to identify milder cases. But Kennedy insists that does not explain the increase in the rate of autism.
And I have to imagine experts think this September deadline is...
Oh, their heads spin off.
Right.
I mean, they're like, I spoke to one expert this week who said, look, I've been studying this for 25 years. If he thinks he can get it done in 5 months, good luck to him. But the honest truth is they have very little hope for what he may find. He says AI will make the difference. That's why they'll be able to speed it up.
Ann, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, Puerto Rico is dealing with the impact this morning of yet another massive island-wide power outage. Luma Energy, which oversees power on the island, says the outage started yesterday afternoon, affecting 1.4 million customers. This video out of San Juan showing people who were stranded, forced to walk along the rails after their train lost power. There's no word yet on what caused the outage, but the utility company says its goal is to have power restored to 90% of customers within 48 to 72 hours. This is the latest in a string of outages to hit Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria severely damaged the island's power grid back in 2017.
Severe weather is threatening Easter travel for millions this weekend.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now with that and more. Hey, Angie.
Hi, guys. Not what the Easter Bunny wants to hear, but we've got some strong storms and potentially snow to track over the next couple of days, and it's already started prompting some of these winter alerts that are up across parts of the West. Notice Billings stretching down to Denver, Salt Lake City area, all included in these winter alerts, and you can see why. A little bit of rain, a little bit of snow happening over that area right now, and some of this rain that we're watching across parts of the Midwest, specifically between Kansas City and St. Louis. As the day goes on, we'll see that ramp up. We do have a chance for strong to even severe storms later today, but also some impressive snow happening across parts of Wyoming and Colorado. That's going to make road travel quite difficult across that region. And then this afternoon, we'll really hone in on specifically areas like Des Moines, Omaha, Norfolk, Kirksville, as we look to see some of those stronger storms develop. Hail is going to be the main threat, but of course the winds, the tornadoes, all on the table for us as this line of thunderstorms kind of works through. Tomorrow, we've got kind of a mess of some rain stretched across parts of the Midwest here and the potential for more of those strong storms to develop. Tomorrow, it's going to be Texas to Michigan that we'll watch, specifically Oklahoma City, St. Louis, Detroit, all those areas, including Chicago, with the threat of hail once again and the winds and, of course, a couple of tornadoes. By Saturday, more of the same, really. And we still are dealing with the potential for some of the strong storms. Then they're going to basically focus from Missouri to Texas. But we'll also see the impacts of a flood threat that will start with all of this heavy rain kind of working over some of those same areas. The stronger storms, places like Little Rock, Dallas, Waco, that's where you have the best chance to see those for your Saturday plans. And then, unfortunately, we get into Sunday, and we've got more of the same. It's really a kind of rinse and repeat across a couple of these locations, specifically the middle of the country and the Midwest. Sunday, it's going to be these kind of stronger storms across parts of the plains, and we'll see that severe risk specifically ramp up in the afternoon across this region. St. Louis, Little Rock, Alexandria, all included. That's that slight risk that you'll see with the wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. Hail will be possible, and again, not ruling out a couple of these tornadoes. The flood threat is going to be mainly focused, you guessed it, across some of those same areas. So St. Louis, Joplin, Oklahoma City, you could get anywhere from 3 to 4 inches. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these isolated spots picked up to 5 inches. We've got some saturated grounds across that region, so it's not going to be hard for us through Sunday, specifically on Saturday, to see some of the flooding concerns. This is, of course, not ideal when people are going to be on the roads traveling for that Easter weekend. The snowfall also going to cause difficulty on the roads. And you can see some of these spots across the Rockies as we get into Saturday have the potential for up to not just a foot of snow and not just a foot and a half, but some places could pick up 2 feet of snow. Not ideal for folks that are going to be, of course, flying in and out of places like Denver, but great if you plan on hitting the slopes for any Easter celebrations. Meanwhile, temperatures, well, they're quite different if you look to Dodge City versus Casper. We've got 30s in Casper, and we've got mid-90s for Dodge City.
Wow.
So a tale of two temperatures. 81 degrees in Springfield today, mid-90s for Lubbock. The heat is really centered across the middle of the country, guys, but it does move a little farther to the east for our friends that have been hoping for some spring-like temperatures there. You're going to get them. 81 degrees in Chicago tomorrow, rounding out the work week into the mid-80s for Memphis. Even Raleigh, Pittsburgh, you're going to be hovering right around 80. New York City, for us, is included in that, guys. Look at Saturday's temperature, 81 degrees.
Finally.
Where's my applause? 67 degrees on Sunday, though, and we get back to the chillier temperatures of 63 by Monday. So a bit of a roller coaster.
A little bit of it. And if you're out west, you can just drive back and forth between
Yeah.
30 and 90 if
Cool
you just
down,
want to.
heat
Right,
up,
exactly.
cool down, heat up.
Thanks, Angie.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Angie.
it.
Thanks.
Much more to come here on this hour of Morning News Now, including the new pill that could prove to be a game changer for Americans looking to start a weight loss journey.
But first, after the break, a long-awaited day in court for the Menendez brothers, now thrown into uncertainty. We'll dig into that coming up next. Welcome back. The Los Angeles District Attorney is making a last-minute bid to delay today's long-awaited resentencing hearing for the Menendez brothers. Just hours before Eric and Lyle Menendez are set to argue their case for freedom, the judge will first hear from the DA. He filed an overnight request asking for more time from the court to obtain the findings from a risk assessment that was ordered by Governor Gavin Newsom. The hearings come more than 3 decades after the brothers were sentenced to life without parole for murdering their parents in 1989. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz is following all of this for us. She joins us from outside the courthouse with the latest. Liz.
Well, hey, Stephen, yeah, the big question now is this going to move forward today? But if it does as scheduled, it will be one of the most pivotal hearings ever for Eric and Lyle Menendez, who, by the way, were sentenced 30 years ago at this very same courthouse.
This morning, after months of legal twists and turns, the moment the Menendez brothers have been waiting for, their critical resentencing hearing set for today.
Letting them come home isn't about letting them off easy. They've served their time.
Eric and Lyle Menendez are currently serving life without parole for the 1989 murders of their parents, Jose and Kitty. They're expected to attend today's proceeding virtually from prison. It's possible they could even testify on their own behalf, along with several supportive family members.
I fully believe that they do not deserve to be in jail.
Over the last year, debate over whether the brothers should be released becoming an obsession among true crime fans, with public interest skyrocketing after Netflix's miniseries about the murders, which dramatizes the abuse Eric and Lyle say they endured from their father.
Eric, we did it!
Kim Kardashian and actor Cooper Koch, who portrayed Eric in the series, among those now supporting the brothers. But the new Los Angeles district attorney says they have not shown remorse for their crimes.
They do not meet the standards for resentencing.
Last week, a judge ruled the brothers have a right to make their case in court, paving the way for today's hearing.
Do you feel like this ruling suggests the judge might be sympathetic to the brothers' case?
I don't think there's any other way to interpret it. Now, there is a presumption that they get resentenced.
But overnight, a last-minute wrinkle. The Los Angeles district attorney filing a motion asking the judge to postpone the proceeding again, saying they need to review new risk assessments of the brothers they say were recently completed by the California Parole Board before making any resentencing decision in this case. An attorney for the brothers has not yet responded as they prepare their latest push for freedom.
Now, if this hearing happens, it's expected to last the full 2 days, today and tomorrow. There are no cameras here in the courtroom. There's going to be a lottery system to allow some members of the public to get a seat inside. The big thing that many people will be watching, will the brothers not only provide written testimony, but will they actually speak and make their case to the judge? Stephen.
All right, Liz Croix for us from Los Angeles. Liz, thank you. NBC News legal analyst Angela Sanadella is here to break this case down even further. So, Angela, first off, what do you make of this effort by the district attorney to delay this hearing?
So, look, I understand it's very frustrating to the defense, but to me, it's not at all an unreasonable request, given that the whole purpose of this hearing is whether or not they've been rehabilitated. So that was how the original district attorney who filed the petition for this resentencing hearing framed it, entirely based on the fact that they've been rehabilitated. They will no longer pose any threat to society, right? There's no risk of recidivism here. So that's the purpose of this hearing. Well, that is also the purpose of the report. It's neutral. It's done by a third party, by the parole board, actually, to determine whether or not these individuals do have any additional risk if they would be released. So delaying it for more information, which isn't necessarily going to be beneficial to either side at this point, I think could be a good thing.
So if the hearing moves forward today, or when it eventually happens, what do you expect to see from both sides? And do you think that we'll actually hear from the Menendez brothers themselves?
So there will be a lot of witnesses called on both sides, especially on behalf of the defendant, because as I just said, the whole point is to see whether or not these brothers will go back out and commit more crimes. So as a result, you will see family members and experts testifying that these boys pose zero risk whatsoever on behalf of the defense. Now, do I think they will testify? I really think almost absolutely not. And there's a reason for that. That's because if they do, then the prosecution then has a chance to question them. Well, as we've heard from this prosecutor in particular, he is adamant that these brothers have been lying repeatedly. That was what he said in his last press conference, that is why he doesn't even support this petition. So you would expect then, if the brothers do testify, that this district attorney will really hammer down those lies.
This sounds like a mini trial in and of itself. Just hearing testimony from both sides would be interesting to see. And the judge who will end up hearing these arguments, the same judge that allowed this resentencing hearing in the first place, what has he said about the case?
So he has said a lot, because in denying the petition to have this go away entirely, which is what this new district attorney wanted, he said, look, there's really good arguments on both sides here. He doesn't think that the last district attorney or this one is making their judgment based on political reasons, but because they actually do have good arguments. So he's really been exasperated, saying, we have to hear all the arguments here, and I have to make a fair decision.
So if this ends up not working out for the Menendez brothers, Are there other avenues for them to get their freedom back?
Yes, there still remain two other avenues. I would say one of them is a real long shot, and that's a request for resentencing for a whole new trial, to have a whole new trial. And that is a habeas corpus petition that's saying that it's unconstitutional, that they are behind bars. So that is like the biggest long shot here. But the second possible path here is clemency, and that is just at the discretion of the governor and of nobody else. Usually that is a long shot, but in this case, Governor Newsom has conducted this risk assessment, has spoken publicly about it, so he has made notes that he is actually considering it. So that would be the last option here.
Wow, interesting to see, sort of a rare situation to hear that from the governor. Angela Cinnadella, thanks so much for your expertise this morning. We appreciate it. Well, now to Florida's East Coast, where police have released body camera video of officers breaking up a house party with more than 100 teenagers. They say the host was a local school principal who's now facing charges. NBC News correspondent Camila Bernal has that story.
Hey, whose party is it?
Neither of us.
Okay.
A Florida teacher suspended for a second time after the release of this body camera footage.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know that I'm in this group chat with a bunch of kids at this party, and they're all sending videos of like everybody drinking, and there's like fights going on.
Calls from classmates and neighbors, all leading officers to one address in Cocoa Beach on the night of January 19th.
This house belongs to the principal of Roosevelt.
Elementary school principal Elizabeth Hill Brodigan seen on the video outside her home as police say a juvenile vomited in the front lawn.
Isn't it feeling good?
After an officer calls for medical aid, another Roosevelt Elementary School employee appears. Third grade teacher Carly Anderson.
Well, you know I'm a teacher. Who the did you put? Who got put in that car?
Well, it's a kid, but they can't disclose.
No. I was here hanging out at this party. I mean, what the? What's wrong with them?
Okay.
You guys gotta act better.
Do you want the truth? There was like 200 kids here drinking.
I've already known.
Drinking, okay? And you're drunk as well.
I'm not drunk.
Yes, you are. I smell it.
Oh, you smell it.
According to the arrest affidavit, students told officers there were over 100 students at the party. Alcohol was readily available in coolers inside the house. Students were using marijuana. Someone pointed a firearm and another punched a peer with a learning disability. Before the body camera was released, Anderson maintained she and the principal had been out for drinks during the party, according to the police report.
Turn around. Put your hands behind your back.
The principal has been charged with child neglect, holding an open house party, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and suspended without pay, according to the school.
You have the right to remain silent.
Anderson, who was charged with disorderly conduct and disorderly intoxication, was placed on administrative leave, but let back into the classroom on Monday by school administration.
We as a school district followed procedures from the Florida statutes and everything else, decided that it was a good idea to allow her to come back for employment. Upon that, literally was the first day that she was back. The same exact day we end up having the body cam footage that comes out, which shows those actions.
Anderson has been suspended again. Her attorney says it's not a crime to curse at a police officer and that he doesn't consider the yard a public place, adding that when Anderson said she was hanging out at the party,
I was here hanging out at this party.
She meant that she went to the party to help break it up. The superintendent sending a letter home to families saying in part, if these allegations are true, it's a complete failure in leadership and violation of our trust. The district is cooperating fully with police as they investigate this matter. Attorneys for Hill Brodigan declined our request for comment. Camila Bernal, NBC News.
Well, coming up, it could be a game changer for those Americans looking for a simple and effective weight loss solution. After the break, the new pill from one big drug maker that's showing a whole lot of promise in a tiny, less invasive package. We'll take a closer look coming up next. We're back now with new data out this morning from pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly that has to do with clinical trials for a new pill to help people looking to lose weight and what could be a game changer for the industry. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk joins us with those details. Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. The life-changing weight loss and diabetes drugs are self-injections, shots that people give themselves once a week. But behind the scenes, a race has been on to make an effective pill, something easier to make, easier to take, and possibly cheaper. Pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly may have just won the race. This morning, new data and new promise for a powerfully effective diabetes and weight loss drug. No need for needles. Eli Lilly says it has a pill. The latest clinical trial suggesting it is as strong as Ozempic.
It activates that GLP-1 receptor in your body.
So people can potentially expect the same kinds of weight loss taking this pill?
That's the hope.
The clinical results out today are from a type 2 diabetes trial. Patients lost 8% of their body mass taking one pill daily, and blood sugar levels dropped dramatically, according to the company.
Which meant if a doctor tested them, they wouldn't even know that they had diabetes anymore.
The news comes as Pfizer recently announced it's ending development of its own daily weight loss pill after a patient experienced a possible liver injury caused by the drug in a trial. The company noting the patient's liver enzymes recovered rapidly after stopping the pill. The class of drugs known as GLP-1s has revolutionized diabetes and weight loss treatment in the U.S., but shortages and cost have made the most popular injectables like Ozempic and Mounjaro out of reach for some. Is this pill going to be cheaper?
Well, one of the advantages of the pill is that it's easier to make in our factories. That should mean more people should have access to it.
And Eli Lilly says it is already being manufactured.
We've built up inventory. So the day that we launch, when we get FDA approval, which could be as soon as next year, we hope to be able to have abundant supply.
Eli Lilly says the side effects for its pill are similar to the injectables, with many participants experiencing digestive issues, but the majority not serious enough to stop taking the pill.
Having a pill that's taken at your convenience, I think can be a game changer for some people.
But obesity expert Dr. Melanie J. cautions that these drugs, whether injectable or in pill form, need to be managed by a doctor. It is not some kind of silver bullet, is it?
It is not. It is not a silver bullet. And we are finding that in real world practice, we still have so much to learn about how to use these medicines.
Wow, fascinating stuff. So this trial was specifically looking at type 2 diabetes, but is Eli Lilly looking at this for obesity as well?
Yes, they are. And they have clinical trials underway for that as well. In fact, the company tells us that those trials and those results actually could be on the pipeline for FDA approval faster than the diabetes drug version of the drug and the pill. All of those expected to be approved next year, according to the company.
Wow, that is fascinating stuff. Stephanie Gosk, thank you. And for more on this, let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Good morning, Dr. Patel. Thanks for joining us. So how significant of a breakthrough do you think this could be? Will this make the drugs even more accessible than we've already seen?
Yeah, Stephen, we hope so. This is technically the first kind of small molecule oral GLP-1 we've seen. Novo Nordisk does have an oral version of their Wegovy product, but this is Lilly's product is the true first distinct kind of class of its own, GLP-1 that's oral, that has what, by all reports and kind of what I've been reading just from the press release, we need to see the more detailed studies that Lilly is expected to present later, but it's showing just as much weight loss at some of the higher doses that you would see with the once-a-week injectable drug. So a daily pill versus a weekly injection, you can see some of the advantages to that, as Stephanie reviewed.
That alone is incredible and could be, I guess, revolutionary for so many people looking into this. Right. When it comes to any type of medication, we often hear that there is a difference in the effectiveness from a pill over something taken orally. Is that a concern at all with this?
Yeah, so this was the first kind of complete phase 3 trial that's, probably the most robust of clinical trials. But what happens in a clinical trial, Stephen, doesn't necessarily translate to real world evidence, as we say. So I think that's exactly what I expect Lilly as they're filing for Food and Drug Administration approval and then get it out into the market as we're expecting next year. So 2026, we won't see this on the shelves anytime soon, but we will probably be able to tell, will there be as much of the weight loss that's been reported in the clinical trials? In general, in this class of drugs, though, it has held out. Where people have had a problem have been the side effects. So I think the reports so far in the trial have been that side effects are similar to the injectable drug, mostly GI side effects. One thing to note is that other oral drugs like this one, again, this is a very distinct one that Lilly is reporting out on. It's kind of unique all by itself. But some of the other oral products that are similar to this class have restrictions. You have to eat them at certain times, and you can't eat fatty foods after you take the pill. This, so far, the Lilly drug, according to the trial results, show that you don't really need to restrict your eating around the timing of the pill. That's another advantage, just from a practical kind of, think about your day-to-day. You kind of remember to take a pill sometimes when you're about to eat. You don't want that to be a restriction. So that could be a real big advantage for this particular pill.
And just as far as patient behavior goes, do you think this will make more people want to take it? I imagine the idea of a needle is a turnoff for a lot of people. Yeah, tell us more about that.
I do. Yeah, I do. I see a lot of patients, and I really try to kind of tailor the drug to the patient and kind of their preferences. But even in patients, and again, as Stephanie mentioned, this has been for diabetics. The primary endpoint really has been diabetes. They saw the weight loss, but this was a drug really meant for diabetics. So when I talk to diabetics and I say, you know, a once-a-week injection of a very small needle, that can just turn people off. So a pill is something that I think we're just a little bit more comfortable. Even children, this is not indicated for children, to be clear, but even children are more used to taking a pill. But when you say needles, and then add to that the cost, and I think you heard that in Stephanie's piece, that can add to kind of supply chain issues. That's caused the delays with some of the popular drugs out right now because of the injections and all the supplies you need. A pill is just easier for transport and for supply in general.
There's just been an explosion of this medication already. Whenever the pill is finally approved, I can't imagine we'll see it everywhere. And also, as Stephanie mentioned in her piece, this was specifically for type 2 diabetes. What will you be looking out for in the trial that targets obesity?
Right. So with diabetics, we know that there's a side effect of weight loss. What I will be looking for in the primary endpoint for weight loss and obesity is to see just that can you maintain at these doses in someone who is not a diabetic that same or equivalent weight loss. That will be an incredibly strong indicator, but I suspect you'll see weight loss. And I think this will, once again, Stephen, going to be filed in that kind of game changer file. This will be, you know, mark this time and date. This is going to be one of those medications that will change the trajectory of a lot of chronic illness in general, not just diabetes.
Wow, a lot of people have been waiting for something like this. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much. Well, coming up, a match made in sand. After the break, the quicksand conundrum one Michigan man faced that looked like something out of an action movie, but luckily for him, it would soon turn into a romance. We'll explain that one coming up next. Welcome back. Organizers for a planned Fire Festival sequel say the event will no longer happen at the Mexican resort town of Playa del Carmen. There was some confusion yesterday after the festival's website momentarily announced the event had been postponed altogether. Billy McFarland, the festival's promoter, told NBC News the planned dates for the end of May will be dependent on where the festival takes place. You may remember McFarland served jail time after pleading guilty to wire fraud and other crimes related to the original Fire Festival back in 2017. Well, shopping on a budget at your favorite Chinese online retailers just got a little bit pricier. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other financial headlines. Good morning, Silvana.
Hey, Stephen, good morning. So, yeah, Chinese online retailers Temu and Shein will raise prices on their products next week as President Trump's crackdown on cheap imports and tariffs increase costs for the companies known for their low prices. Now, both firms sending letters to customers saying they'll increase prices starting April 25th, encouraging shoppers to buy now at today's rates. President Trump signed an executive order last month closing that so-called de minimis exemption, which allows packages worth less than $800 from China and Hong Kong to be shipped duty-free. Hermes says it will raise prices in the U.S. to offset the impact of President Trump's tariffs. The company is banking on its pricing power as one of the world's most exclusive luxury brands. Hermes is widely known for its Kelly and Birkin handbags. Now, U.S. tariffs could add a 20% charge to European fashion and leather goods. And fans of YouTube star Mr. Beast are seeking refunds for a $1,000 event in Las Vegas that they say was disappointing. The 3-day event was advertised as immersive and unforgettable, with guests told they should expect a mystery gift sent to their hotel rooms. That turned out to be a bag of merchandise already available to the public and a box of chocolates. Now, Resorts World Las Vegas has acknowledged expectations were not met and is offering to repay attendees, guys.
Wow. All right, Silvana. There you go. Thank you.
You got it.
This next story feels like a scene straight out of the movies. A man got stuck in quicksand-like conditions while searching for rocks on a beach in Michigan. But what's an action movie without a little romance? NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin tells us what happened next.
It's a popular trope in action movies. Heroes like Indiana Jones bogged down in quicksand, racing against time to get out.
Keep your arms above the surface. When the kid comes back, grab on.
But for one Michigan man, that cliche of cinema almost became a reality. Mitchell O'Brien trapped not quite in quicksand, authorities say, but a mix of sand and muck. He says he was out searching for rocks at a beach on Michigan's northwest coast when suddenly he hit a soft spot in the sand and got stuck. His friend, Bree Ziga, was there with him.
I thought we needed help instantly, but he was very good at reassuring that he would get out of there and that he was okay.
After 15 minutes to no avail, Mitchell still stuck up to his waist.
The sand was just getting put back almost faster than I could get it out of the way.
To me, those moments were terrifying, honestly, just to see somebody you care about in a situation.
The pair eventually decided to call 911 for help.
He's now got his foot stuck in the muck, cannot get himself out. 5 feet out.
And that's when this action movie turned into a romance.
I referred to her as my girlfriend that's trying to call as well. At the exact same time, she got through to another operator and said, my boyfriend is stuck in the sand.
2 years of this guy being my best friend and just trying to hide everything, how I felt, and then he tried to die on me and becomes my boyfriend in the middle of it.
Firefighters eventually arrived on the scene and pulled Mitchell out within a few minutes.
Patient's been removed from the sand.
Although situations like this are rare, fire officials and Mitchell warn others to be more mindful of deep, loose sand.
Go out there, enjoy it, look for your pretty blue stones like I did, but just be careful.
The couple now appreciating how a soft spot in the sand turned into a soft spot in each other's hearts. Erin McLaughlin, NBC News.
Wow, so many twists and turns.
No kidding.
A great ending, though.
I can't wait for the movie.
Yeah, well, coming up, return to the office.
Yeah, after the break, we're going to bring you my exclusive conversation with some familiar faces, the cast of The Office, looking back at the show's legacy, still pulling in new fans 20 years after its premiere. That is next. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Well, you know, we love space news on Morning News Now, and this one is getting people excited, including me. Scientists say they have their hands on, quote, the strongest evidence yet of possible alien life beyond our solar system. Researchers at Cambridge University who were studying a distant planet using the James Webb Space Telescope have picked up evidence of 2 chemical compounds. Now, these compounds are only known to be produced by life here on Earth. The planet in question, K218b, is around 700 trillion miles away from Earth, so not exactly in the neighborhood where humans could travel anytime soon. But the scientists say this discovery could mean there is life on even many more planets than we thought before. Really exciting stuff.
That's cool. What if there's just one guy who's like there on that planet, like just hey everyone.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. Finally, this hour, it's an Office reunion 2 decades in the making. We're talking about the hit TV show The Office, which premiered in America 20 years ago. Now, at first, the mockumentary, which is based off a British show of the same name, was not a huge ratings hit. But it eventually hit its stride, lasted 9 seasons in all. And now, in the era of streaming, the show is finding a new generation of fans. I got the chance to sit down exclusively with some of the cast to talk about their success and also a spin-off now in the works.
20 years after they were hired, these fictional co-workers remain real-life friends. This reunion featured the actors who played Kevin, Creed, Meredith, Stanley, Angela, Oscar, and Aaron.
The thing about our show that is so special, I think, for all of us, that none of us were famous when we started. So as the show got famous, we did too.
We gathered at Pickwick's Pub in Los Angeles.
Next round of drinks is on me, people.
They used to shoot scenes here, but on the show it was called Poor Richards, though not everyone here recognized it.
How does it feel to be at Poor Richards?
I have to be honest, I only just realized we were at Poor Richards.
To be fair, they did spend most of their time at, well, The Office, Dunder Mifflin, a fictitious paper company.
Ow!
You did have to fill a lot of time sitting at those desks.
We did. I did my taxes the first year.
Phyllis did her taxes. I did my taxes. We found my house, her house.
Call me crazy, but I was learning my lines and concentrating on my craft.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
During that first season, it was like not exactly clear if this was going to work out or be a hit, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Angela talks about it. She cleared out her trailer.
I took my name off the door You know, like, and it was just a piece of paper that they had laminated with some Velcro, but I still took it. I was like, I'll remember this time.
Yeah. Needless to say, the show found success, with Ellie Kemper joining in season 5.
I feel so lucky because you guys, or at least, I mean, maybe you're acting, but you embraced me very kindly halfway through. So I'm not part of the original cast, but thanks for.
Are you just?
I just want to
pointing out that you're a lot younger than us? Yeah.
Who here is most like their character?
Hey, I will say that Creed sends really random texts.
Yeah.
Like
just
what?
a picture. I think you were by a pool because you didn't have a shirt on, and you were holding a hairless cat.
That was my neighbor's cat.
Do fans think you're like your character when they approach
They're
you?
either relieved or frightened. Yeah.
Have you ever seen a foot with 4 toes?
What are you doing?
In all, they made 201 episodes, wrapping in 2013 and finding new fame in 2020.
COVID happened, and that pushed us to a whole different stratosphere.
It was the most streamed show that year, 57.1 billion minutes watched.
People couldn't go to their real office, so they came to ours.
The enduring popularity of the series keeps them busy.
That's what she said.
Brian Baumgartner wrote a few books, including a cookbook featuring Kevin's famous chili.
It's probably the thing I do best.
Angela Kinsey hosts a popular podcast, Office Ladies, with Jenna Fisher, and soon we'll get a spin-off series focused on a dying Midwestern newspaper with Oscar reprising his role.
Can you tell us anything about that?
They're still editing and stuff. More will be revealed, as my wife likes to say.
Is it exciting to be a part of it?
Yes, it's exciting.
And as they reflect on 20 years, they're grateful for this office job with lifetime benefits.
I mean, the show feels bigger over the last 5 years than it ever did when it was on the air. I think the end of the legacy is not fully been written yet.
It was the biggest gift of our lives, truly, and we're so thankful for it. Happy 20th anniversary to the office.
So as you can see, not much is known right now about that spin-off series. It did start production last year. It stars Donald Gleason. It's going to follow that same mockumentary style as The Office. Apparently, the fictional documentary crew that followed Dunder Mifflin is now chronicling a newspaper. And somehow Oscar is there. We don't know how or why. We'll have to find out. We know this new series is going to stream on Peacock, which is also where you can find every episode of The Office now, including exclusive extended superfan episodes.
There are so many superfans of The Office.
Exactly, and
that
it just keeps
spin-off
growing.
Is going to be great.
All right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But your news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.